Hello and welcome to Classically Imperfect, a mental health organization dedicated to helping young classical musicians experiencing mental health distress. I'm Mary Elizalde, one of the co-founders and director of operations, and today I am joined by Dr. Annie Bosler, a professional horn player, music educator, and the co-author of the book College Prep for Musicians. Today we'll be discussing time management specifically for students preparing for their college careers. Hi, Dr. Bosler, how are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
Course. My first question for you is, what is your musical background? How did you get involved in music?
Sure. So I started playing French horn when I was in sixth grade. I'm actually from South Carolina. And so I started in sixth grade, middle school band essentially, and then worked my way up through high school and then went on to major in French horn at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, and then got my undergrad there and then moved to Los Angeles, and got my master's and doctorate here at USC, so University of Southern California, and then started, kind of in the industry from there playing and then also teaching.
That's wonderful. Those two schools are some of my top choices right now.
Oh,
Um,
that's awesome.
so my next question for you is, what do you think is the biggest mistake musicians make regarding time management in the practice room? What can we do to help form healthier habits or fix other habits that aren't so helpful?
On a complete side note, just to give people a little more background, I actually worked with the company TED, on a cartoon, which is about a 5-minute cartoon. If y'all want to watch more on this topic, because there's so much to discuss. I mean, we could talk about it, just that one question for literally an hour. There's a cartoon called How to Practice Effectively for Just About Anything. And if you Google that, you'll find it online, and it's got some, I think, some great tips in it. I co-wrote the script for it. But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest mistake that most musicians make, I think there's I don't know if there's one, but I would say there's some common things I find often working with students, and some things that, I observe in myself too. I would say some good tips to start would be that, a lot of time is lost through, kind of getting distracted. And so I always recommend to everyone, if you can, take all the tools out of your life that distract you, maybe your computer, maybe your cell phone, your iPad, your tablet, whatever you have, and just either put them on airplane mode or put them off to the side. And so I find, a lot of students will use those things when they practice, and those are really great tools, but you want to make sure that you kind of also manage your time in the practice room. And there's a great app, if you don't know this one, it's called Forest. And so you can actually, have you ever used this one? I'm just
I
curious.
don't think so, no.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. So you can on Forest, can put it on any device. It's kind of funny. It's like a video game in a video game, but it helps you manage your time. So you can actually tell the app which things you're allowed to access while you're, using your device. And so if you leave the app to go access something, say your text or social or whatever, even YouTube. So it plants a plant when you start, like a tree. And then as you use the app, it grows. So if you exit the app, it will actually kill your tree. And in your forest, you'll actually have a dead tree. So it's kind of a funny little thing. And so it's like a video game in a video game where you tell it, you'll say, I'd like to practice for 45 minutes. And then it will start growing whatever plant you choose. And then as you go through your process, then you will have that item. And so in your forest, you can see, it's like kind of a reward system too. You can see all the things that you've grown throughout all your practices. And I've had a lot of students use this and have great success with it, not only in the practice room, but also studying. And it's kind of cool too, because you can get coins and other things, so you can buy other things for your forest. I mean, it sounds more like a video game, but it's not. It's a focus app. It's really cool. So I think a lot of people lose, focus in the practice room. And so obviously turning off all the devices is important. I think another big thing for students is to make sure, and professionals too, is to make sure that you have an organized system to your practice. And so, if let's say you're a high school student and you're wanting to major in music of any area, it doesn't have to just be performance. Then what you would want to do is think about, what are those things required to do that? What pieces am I going to be required to play? And then just start to break those pieces down. Like, what are the quote unquote tricky sections, and mark those. I usually tell all my students, put parentheses around those spots, even when you do your first listen to that piece. And then from there, you can, then decide what tempos you're going to take it, or make a map of what your practice is. So then when you go to practice, oh yeah, that that one parentheses spot is one thing I need to look at. This other parentheses spot I need to look at. So if you organize your practice with small goals and big goals, and then use some kind of system to track it, whether it's a piece of paper and a pencil, or a spreadsheet on some device or whatnot, and just so you can know how many times you practice it or you need to practice it throughout your week. And I think the organization is really important. So those are probably the biggest two things I see, but there's also other little things too. Like I said, we could talk about it for quite some time, but there's some really good tips in that TED video I mentioned.
Got it. Yeah, that app that you mentioned, I feel like I would use that app every time I practice because I get really distracted, especially when my phone is on my stand. And I feel like myself and a lot of other musicians make the excuse that we need it for our tuner or our metronome. But at the same time, perhaps buying an actual, tuner or a metronome can be more useful than having your phone on your stand because you're
Well,
gonna.
in the Forest app, just make a note, say I want to access, TE Tuner or whatever your metronome and app, metronome is or tuner is. Just you can actually put those on the list, and so you won't get, docked a tree or a plant or whatever from accessing
Yeah.
those. So it's really cool. And I actually use it when I write. So if, or when you study, I use it all the time when I write stuff. So if I have, a lot of emails or something to do, I'll put it on for 20 minutes and keep it short too. Don't feel like you have to go do an hour and a half practice session. Let's do a
Yeah.
20-minute session or a 45-minute session, whatever you want to do. It's really useful. That's cool. I'd love to know if you use it, what your thoughts are on it too.
No, definitely. I'll tell all my friends about it. We'll all get on the app. My next question for you is, what did your college audition process look like? Can you share maybe a routine or like a schedule, like you were saying, or a warm up that you did that helped you succeed?
Sure. This will hopefully make you laugh and make everyone out there feel a little better about themselves. But the reason I have such a passion for college prep and helping students through college prep is that my parents and I did this all backwards. So I grew up on a farm in South Carolina. My mom's a farmer and my dad's a general contractor, and they knew nothing about what to do with this musician that they had in their family. And so we literally did not make our first trip or thought about colleges or looking at music schools until Thanksgiving of my senior year. And if you know anything about college applications, they're really due music ones are mostly due November 30th or December 1st. So
Mhm.
we were way behind, to say the least, like way behind. And so, I tell everybody I work with that's, stressed out about college apps. I'm like, I didn't even have my first one put together until then. So, and it wasn't anyone's fault, we just didn't know. And
Yeah.
so, everybody should know that, worst case, you're not as behind as I was. And
Mhm.
so I think in terms of, for me also, I would say it more became what happened after that point, meaning in my senior year after that. So more when I was preparing for the actual auditions, I think it's just the consistency of practice. I mean, you have to realize that if you're, again, whatever area of music you're going into, or even if you want to submit a supplemental recording with, say, if you're going into biology or English or any other major, business, undecided, you could put a supplemental recording with your application. And I think that's something to make sure you understand. But if you're going into a music area, I think it's about the consistency. So if you want to be a composer, consistency of working on your portfolio. If you want to be a performer, it's the consistency of how many times you're practicing a week. It's more about the consistency of of the quality than it is about the consistency of the quantity. And I think that's the most important thing. And so once I really knew what I was, where I was applying and what I was doing, and was preparing for the live audition part of the process, which if you don't know this, is between January 15th and March 15th of your senior year. That, I just really dug deep, and over the holidays and all that was putting in a lot of time. And I think that consistency actually really helped me, but I would definitely say I was much behind in the process. And I think, anyone listening to this podcast right now is probably already ahead of that part.
This is kind of a little bit of a side note. Can you talk a little bit more about supplemental recordings? There's not that much information about supplemental recordings on the internet, which might confuse people, especially myself, since my main focus right now is psychology, but I want a minor in music.
Oh, cool.
So I'm kind of just like a little confused on what the supplemental.
Yeah, no, and so I think anyone associated with any kind of music program in high school, whether it's your high school band, your high school choir, something like Yola in Los Angeles, or in any program, any youth orchestra or whatnot, means that you play or sing or do something with music. And so supplemental recordings or supplemental applications, the technical word is supplemental materials. So let's use that. So if an application says, please submit your supplemental materials here, what that means is anything that you do kind of within the arts, like if you dance, if you play, two instruments, if you play, photographer, if you're a graphic artist, anything in the arts you can actually put in this category. And so I'll give you an example. I had a French horn student who was also a singer and also was a fantastic photographer. So I said, hey, let's make a portfolio for you of your photography. Let's make a video of your singing. Let's make a video of your playing and put all of that in the supplemental category. Now for music, what supplemental recording is that would go in the supplemental material category of your application is usually two things. You pick two different pieces from two different genres of music. So it could be anything from Baroque to contemporary, or like, romantic versus classical. Usually it means kind of a technical piece and a slower piece, lyrical piece. And they want two contrasting works that fit within 10 minutes or less. And so if you played two instruments, you'd submit, two 10-minute blocks, each instrument having two different pieces to go with that instrument. And then if you had another art form, say photography or graphic art, you'd do a portfolio, which usually turns out to be a PDF that you would submit with that in that supplemental material section. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
Yeah. And let me make just a quick vocabulary definition. So that's supplemental material called supplemental recordings for musicians. For somebody that's looking to go into performance or any other area of music, they might require a pre-screening audition. That is also a recording of yourself playing, but usually there's much more that you have to record, and they're much more specific. So just they're very different vocabulary terms, but they're things that everybody should know, and definitely get very confused, if not defined. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for clearing that up for me.
Yeah, you should definitely make one for yourself for sure. And
Mm-hmm.
and can I make one quick note on the
Yeah.
minor as well? So for anyone that wants to minor in any area, quite honestly, it doesn't music or not, you actually don't declare that till you get to the school. So usually the school does. You don't put that anywhere on your actual like application that you're applying. You could talk about your interest in say your essays if they fit the essay, but you would not actually declare that until you got to the school. And then the first week, if you'd like, go see your registrar, the college guidance counselor, and say, this is an interest of mine. I'd like to add this minor. What would that look like? How would I structure my classes to fit that in? And that's where you would declare that. So once you've done all your applications, you've now gotten into your school, you're now going to your school, that's when you declare your minor.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. No. This is exciting. I'm glad we're doing this for students because it's there's a lot that could always use this clarification, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And going back to what you said about practicing, some people in Classically Imperfect are actually injured right now, and it's as a result of over practicing and things like that. How can we avoid injury during our auditions? And do you have any tips for those who are injured and how they can practice? I know mental practice is a big topic within not having to physically practice, but do it mentally. But I feel like nobody really knows what that means. It can mean
That
like,
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. There's so much to talk about within injury prevention and just I think keeping musicians healthy in general. And I will say there's an interesting tidbit for you. Sports medicine term came about in 1928. The term music medicine came about in 1982. So you can see how far behind the music industry is from even just the sports industry in terms of like actually talking about this information. So first, thank you for bringing this up because I think we could definitely talk about it. Ask professionals who've been injured. Usually the room will go to crickets. I will tell you first and foremost, I've had several, and it's like, I think we need to be more open about talking about this stuff. Because I think that helps others not go through it. So first and foremost, what I would say is that if you feel like you're in a place of injury, tell your organization, tell your teacher, be open about it. And then usually we're in that place because, think about every instrument in the orchestra, they're asymmetric, right? I mean, I play French horn. It's the most awkward thing to hold ever. Like half the weight's on one side, There's no weight on the other side almost, it's like, it's pretty awkward. And so they're, our bodies are designed also to, they're not 100% symmetric. And then you're dealing with this, so they're a little asymmetric. You're dealing with this asymmetric instrument. I mean, they look symmetric, but they're not, our bodies. And so I think the first step is your technique being taken care of on your instrument? That's a really important thing to ask yourself. And if you find yourself playing and, and you look in the mirror or you take a video of yourself and you're like, why does that look weird? And I had a student that came in today that was playing, we usually like, this is our hand position for French horn, essentially like straight from here to here. And they came in, literally their hand was like at this angle, right? And, if you do that for too long, it's going to be painful. So we worked, to straighten that out. But it's, simple things where you don't even think about it, just that repetition over time is what causes an injury. If something is not, in an ergonomic or fashion. And so I think for anybody feeling pain, first, you got to talk. You got to tell somebody, you got to figure it out. Then second, you got to find the root of the problem. Don't just put a Band-Aid on it, because that's not getting to the root. Usually a lot of it is in somebody's technique. It might be in how you're holding the instrument. Technique is everything from the posture to how you're holding an instrument to what you're doing when you're trying to play essentially fast or move through certain parts of the instrument. And so you want to make sure that you're being as ergonomic about all of that as you can, and as efficient as you can. And then if you're feeling kind of weird about it, or it doesn't feel, it feels like you're overworking, I would say that could definitely lead to some of it. So in terms of how this all applies to college auditions, most students will start to practice more in their junior and senior year than they probably ever have, because now this becomes, this is what I want to do, or this is where I want to go, or I want to add this, I want to add supplementals to my college application, or I want to add pre-screening, or I want to major in music, or whatever they're deciding to do. And I find this often. And so if a student is feeling injured, I think, or feeling like they might be on a path to injury, I think that's a better way to put that. I think they should take a step back and kind of, just take a look, just worst case, go online and look at some of the famous teachers out there who are known to teach great technique, because you can ask around and figure this out in everyone's instrument, and see if you can find some videos to help. Obviously talk to your private lesson teachers if you have those, or your directors, if you don't have a private lesson teacher, and just have people point you in the right direction of people that, people do specialize in technique. Not everyone does, but a lot of people do. And I think in that regard, you have to talk to people. Does that make sense? And there's no real quick and easy answer, but I would I always think about, if you get yourself into a cycle, which I told you I've had my own injuries myself, but if you get into a cycle of an injury, you feel like you're kind of in this like hopelessness almost to get out of it, or in a hopeful place to get out of it, but sometimes it can feel hopeless also. And so until you find that right person to help you, it kind of is there. So that's why talking is really good. So I did a talk on ergonomics actually at the Colburn School that is online. It goes through a lot of ergonomic stuff for instruments and actually pure injury prevention. So if you just Google my last name and injury prevention or ergonomics, you can find it, but it's a good starting place. It's, I have a lot of thoughts on it, but it's not, there's a lot of starting place for that if people need to look into that.
Yeah, thank you. I also think one of the reasons why people might not realize that they have improper technique is maybe their teacher can't see it anymore because they've been with them for so long. And it might be a place where you realize that you might need a different teacher. This is what happened with me. I had been studying with a teacher for like 2 years, and I was given the opportunity to study with someone else. And when I studied with her, when I began with my current lesson teacher right now, everything changed for me. Like my technique was immediately 1,000 times better. My back stopped hurting. My bow arm was so much better. And it really helped me both mentally and physically and made me want to play. And it's not necessarily anyone's fault when you grow out your teacher. It's just something that you need to realize and just take into account, and maybe think to yourself, maybe I do need a different teacher, or maybe I need another perspective if you've been with this person for so long.
No, and I think that's great advice. I would just add to that too. I mean, as a teacher and as someone who's had a lot of teachers, there's no one teacher that has every answer, and you're going to be a product of like 5, 6, 10, 15 teachers. Who knows how many you'll have, and I'm a definite product of like, I don't even want to count how many, and obviously I have some that are more influential in my life over long stretches of time than others, but you take certain things from certain people, and everybody's built different too. I mean, I'm 5'2". If I'm studying with a 6'2" French horn player, who's to say that, my hand's the same size as him, or, or
Yeah.
what, my lungs are even the same size, so there's so much that is different. So I agree with you. I think it's really good to explore new teachers and new things. If for some reason you feel like you're not getting answers from one person, definitely look into that. I think it's a really good thing, so great advice, I would say.
Thank you. So my next question for you is, what is something you wish you knew when you were preparing for your college auditions? Did you personally manage your time well? Because I know a lot of people who I've interviewed in the past, they tell me like, "Oh, I could have used my time better."
Yeah, so I mean, I think, like I told you, I was kind of late to the game in terms
Yeah.
of even knowing what was kind of happening. But I think for anyone that's trying to manage their time, I mean, I'll say this: I've gotten definitely a lot better at time management over the years, for sure. And my husband always makes fun of me because he's always like, I think I would say a strength of mine is actually time management. Truly, just because I can get a lot of stuff done in a day, but I have a whole bunch of systems of hierarchying things to make sure that that there are kind of tips and tricks to it. Like, one tip is to always kind of look at what has to get done, and then I personally like to start with the things that are the quickest, because if I have, like, let's say there's 8 things on your list, right? I've got to get, whether it's tasks or on the practice page, I need to do these 8 things, right? And let's say a couple of them are really intense or really tricky. You have 2 options. You can start with the tricky ones, or you can start with the easiest ones. It kind of depends on my mindset. So, meaning, like, if I'm feeling a lot of energy, I actually like to take care of the little ones first, because then I just go poop poop poop, that's done, and I'm looking at maybe 2 or 3 big ones.
Mhm.
But some days, if I'm feeling like, okay, like, that's, my energy is going to go into those 2 or 3, then I actually like to start with those big ones first and then save the other ones for last. But so I think you should ask yourself, like, kind of, where's your energy, and then you can, and that's what I was saying before, having that organized plan. So when I was in high school, I would say I would say that I actually did a pretty good job of putting the goals in front of me for that kind of thing. Granted, it's gotten way better as I've gotten older, and I think I just I've been able to recognize quickly, like, here's my list of things I need to practice, and then here's how I want to hierarchy them today. But I think for anyone in, high school right now, if you're feeling like you're not great at that time management, the exercise I usually do with students is that we first start by taking their whole week and blocking it out in a calendar. I just did this with a Yola student just about a week and a half ago. Actually, we sat down with just a piece of paper. It's actually a Word document, and we just made a block for every day of the week, and then we literally wrote down everything they had to do in that day, like, because it usually is, every week is the same, right? Just
Yeah.
all the things you have to do. So we put all those down, and then we just said, okay, like, how much time do you want to spend on homework every day? Made a note. How much time do you want to spend on your instrument every day? Made a note, right? Because we all kind of have the hope of what you want to do. And then we went through and we just said, okay, let's also pick out which day you want to have as, like, your fun day, your light day. And
Yeah.
so we made that note, and then we just looked at, like, how much other playing do you have in the day, and try to take that into account too. And then we started to plug in, like, where they would do their practice, if that made sense. And I think it was when we got done with that exercise, the student was like, holy cow, this makes so much more sense to me, because now I also have that rewards day, and I have my days blocked out. So I know if I don't get stuff done on this Monday because I have more time, then Tuesday's pretty packed, right? And so I only have that little bit of time on Tuesday. So if I don't put the time in on Monday and even Wednesday, where I have more open time, then I'm going to be stretched for time on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so, if that makes sense, it's like kind of knowing where some people haven't even thought out, where is my open time in the week, right? You just kind of go day by day and float through your week. But I think if you really sit down and think about it, then it really helps you map out, like, oh, this is where I would go next, or this is where I would go next. Does that make sense? And then
Yeah.
it kind of gives you perspective too, like, oh man, I know that Tuesday's coming up, so let's do try to get that extra 30 minutes on homework or practice, or whatever you need to do. I think that really gives you that help. Does that make sense? I think.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And
I'm one of those people who needs to have everything mapped out, in order to at least visually see what's been going on through every day. But also, sometimes you might not follow that schedule, but that's completely okay because you have the rest of the days of the week, and you can like
Yeah,
alter your schedule.
and the first step to time management is just trying to do better than what you currently do, you know. And if you're gonna beat yourself up for it, then don't even try to do work on your time management, you know. So first step is to be like, okay, let's just look at what it looks like, let's understand it, and then, you know, let's see what we can do to help ourselves. But don't beat yourself up, because it, you know, it's just like, okay, this week was better than last week, great, you know, I got 2 more minutes of studying in a day than I did last week. That, you know, that's 14 more minutes of studying total. That's a lot more studying, actually, you know. So you can actually make a difference in just little increments of stuff that you don't even realize, you know. So and so I think with time management, I mean, again, we could talk about that for a solid hour easily, but my recommendation to everybody is that if you want to do better on it, don't think it has to be perfect or whatever that means to you, you know. Just try to do better, and as long as that is that, you know, it will lead to more positivity than not, you know.
Yeah,
Does that
definitely.
make sense?
It's also important to know that you can't improve so much in one week. You have to take it week by week. And if I remember, this used to be me in my junior year, because everyone knows junior year is like the most aggressive year of out of the 4 years. So I would expect myself to carry on so much throughout the week, but it's not doable, because if you put too much pressure on yourself, then that's only going to make it worse in the end, and you're only going to feel bad about yourself. So it's important to improve, but at the same time, you know, not to a point where it mentally harms you. And that's, I think, something that a lot of musicians also deal with. Like, they practice for hours and hours a day. And one of my friends recently was like, oh, I've been practicing for 3 hours a day. And I'm like, why are you practicing for 3 hours a day? That's so unhealthy, on top of playing at school. It's unhealthy time management. They're getting things done, but at the same time it's hurting them, and it's only going to make it worse in the end, which I think is something that musicians need to be more aware of, especially in high school and right now when we're auditioning for college, you know?
I think just make sure you give yourself breaks. I mean, you know, there are some instruments, like, you know, if you look at some of the top conservatories, some of those students are practicing, you know, large chunks. But
Mm-hmm.
I would just say, you know, just try to give yourself breaks, make yourself take a walk, you know what I mean? Just because it will bring you back more focused. And that's the most important thing. Because again, the quality is better than the quantity always. You know,
Mm-hmm.
consistency of quality is will do light years better than just lots of quantity, you know.
My last question for you is, do you think there are enough mental health resources in the classical music community?
Wow, that's a great question. So let me just start by saying, you know, I think we could always have more of that everywhere, and probably all aspects of life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in terms of mental health resources. And so I definitely think there are some great ones out there for sure. But I definitely think there could always be more. In you know, and I think just the access is important. It's not just whether there is a lot or not. You know, like, what is the access like? Is it, can students get to them? Are they too expensive? You know what I mean? So I think that's really important. We when we wrote our college prep book for musicians, we put a chunk in there. And also, just by the way, I'd love to send you a copy, and we could even do like a raffle of one if you'd ever want.
Yeah.
You know, and or a couple of them if you'd like. But I think we put in the college prep book a section on, you know, preparing for auditions and kind of how to get mentally to that spot. And I realized I didn't answer one question you had, which was how to visually practice, mentally practice. I want to address that in just one second. But what I would say is that, you know, we put a spot in there because I think it is so important, and so many people don't kind of know how to always deal with, you know, having to take all these auditions. But, you know, I also think that there's two sides of it, not only just the performance, the mental health of your performing side, you know, no matter what your instrument is, no matter what your, you know, goals are. But I also think, you know, just taking care of ourselves, because you are practicing a lot by yourself, you know. And I think, you know, we can get in our head about how we're doing, or, you know, how we are compared to whoever, you know, and it can get to be a really unhealthy place. And so, you know, I think just making sure that, again, talking to people if you don't feel like you're in a good spot with things, because, you know, if you're in a youth orchestra, in a choir, or whatnot, you have directors. Those people have done a lot of performing themselves. They've done a lot of practicing themselves. They've, you know, lived some life themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So have conversations with them, you know, and hopefully they have places they can point you in directions as well. And, you know, there are some great resources out there. And you know, even I've watched a lot of the top conservatories now add some of them have added a performance, a peak performance specialist or a performance specialist. And they've also added just psychologist specialists that specialize in working with student musicians. And I think that that's been a really positive thing for students to have access to. And again, I do think there's a lot of good stuff online as well. If worst case, if you need to look things up, but just because I know the access can be a problem to some of it. If you want to work on practicing mentally, what that looks like is you would take a passage, just say that it's tricky, right? Fingering tricky, or maybe something that you find yourself maybe not hitting all the notes, or maybe something you don't musically play like you want to play, and put the standard in your head of if you know how it goes, have that standard there. If you have no idea how it goes, maybe you're sight reading it or want to work on it from a sight reading setting, then what you want to do is just like you would practice anything else, start slowly and work out your fingers and your bow or your fingers or whatever needs to be worked out really slowly, like really under tempo, and try to hear the pitches with it as well. And then just keep working it, just like you would work at home. Turn the metronome up a couple clicks, or whatever you're feeling the tempo is, just turn it up a couple clicks, and then just gradually add time and speed to it, meaning speed overall to it, and work that up, and keeping the musical line in your head, keeping the musical all the pitches in your head as well, and kind of what your goal is with it, and just gradually increasing that will help the visualization practice of you doing it. And then also, that's just from the physical active practice in the music. Then you could do some exercises as well where if something is ready to go, you watch yourself either in your body or out of your body. It can be either direction, like you're watching yourself walk on stage, or you're watching yourself in your body walk on stage from within your body. And then you see yourself perform your audition from start to finish, and it goes well. You'd be surprised how many people do it in a negative manner in their head, which is always kind of funny. So literally make sure it goes well, and then see yourself walk off the stage, also having gone well. Worst case, put yourself on like Disney Concert Hall or something and seeing that happen, even though that might not be the venue of your audition. But if you don't know the venue, you can always create something you already know, and then go through that process, and that will help. And you'd be surprised how much things get construed in your head even when you've done nothing physically. And so that there's a lot of studies that have proven this stuff works, and it definitely does. And so I would just say, if you have a hard spot in your practice, or you're working on your scales or whatever they are, do those mentally a lot, like before you go to bed, 10 minutes or something. And then if you feel like you're at a place where you're ready to perform, do some of the other visualizations so you can see yourself get there. And I think just even from a mental health perspective, I think if you're feeling nervous about something, or you're feeling concerned about something, watch yourself do it. Do you see yourself make a mistake? Take a step back, laugh at that, because you just created that move in your head. Nobody else owns that, right? You own it. That's it. And then change it. You're the director. Change it. Make it go like the best performance you've ever heard of your life. And then that will lead to, do a lot of those. And that will help you also have more confidence in yourself as a player too. Because it will start to replace any negative repetitions you have, hopefully. I think that it kind of ties in the practice side and the mental health side too, because you can do a lot with that without ever even touching your instrument. There's a lot of famous stories of players that have done things like that. So I hope that helps.
It definitely made sense, like the visualization of like seeing yourself and how that's you and that's nobody else, and nobody else experiences that except yourself. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to learn more about Classically Imperfect, make sure to click the link in our bio. Bye.